And we are live. So I will give a few seconds for the system to notify everyone that we're live. And in the
Okay.
meantime, for the sake of the recording, I'll introduce myself. I'm Andrea Henderson. I am an executive talent strategist. I am a partner at TD Global in the life science, healthcare, nonprofit CEO and board practice groups. uh, among I'm a multi hyphenate, so there are other things. But today I'm here talking to Doug Parks, who is a strategic advisor, and I want to give him an opportunity to say more about all of the things that he does.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea. Hello, everyone. Doug Parks here. As Andrea alluded to, currently a strategic advisor with my own company, advising to mostly small to medium-sized businesses, occasionally a large privately held as well. Uh, Previously, the way I would describe my career, I guess, Andrew, would be sort of in three acts. Sort of act one spent more on the business development side of things. Um, Act two would have been more in org development and strategy consulting with consulting organizations. And it was there that I began to believe, garner this thought that people would be the last bastion of competitive differentiation. And so I then began Act Three, which has me now in the realm of HR and HR consulting.
That is really great. And so as part of Act Three in your consultancy, um, and your in-house, um, you serve as a consultant in-house,
Mhm.
in HR capacity. I just wanted to mention that because it lends a lot of credibility to what we're about to talk about because you've been in the seat. You're not talking like an outsider who's giving academic advice. You've
Yeah.
lived this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been in the top job as a chief human resources officer, chief people officer. And so I've been where a lot of our audience uh, is currently or aspires to be. And so, yeah, so there's a heavy dose of practical reality, having sat in the seat. And so this melding of these experiences across the sort of three phases, if you would, and having sat in the seat, I would hope gives me a bit of credibility to speak on the topic.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, we had a conversation and it came up because we were talking about the evolving role of the HR leader,
Yeah.
in this context, right? We're in a very unique economic climate, political climate. We're at a really interesting inflection point in our technology evolution. So many things sort of converging, and how HR can show up as a strategic partner, not simply a cost center. Um, and we talked about strategic alignment. So if you when you talk about strategic alignment as a cornerstone of value creation, which
Mhm.
ultimately is the goal of an enterprise, what does that look like in practice to
Mhm.
you when HR is sitting at the table with the CEO, CFO, and other leadership team members?
Sure. Well, I mean, look, it starts with speaking the language of business, and one of the things that when you talk about these five pillars that have defined how I have transformed HR functions and enabled organizations, it has become imperative that HR continues this evolution beyond the transactional or tactical and into exercising our more strategic muscle. You look at what's happening in the market today. For example, the recent announcement by IBM of the impact AI is having on the HR function and the elimination of several hundred HR jobs within IBM. Or even today, Moderna announcing that they are combining the HR function with the IT function. And increasingly, this impact that AI is having on the HR function, it's here, it's happening, and it's real. And so it's going to place an increased emphasis as the more transactional, task orientated work that has defined the function up until this point is taken over by AI. We're going to have to show up and exercise more of the strategic muscle. So how do you do it? It's speaking that language of business, talking about revenue. We need to talk about hard dollar savings. We need to actually talk about cost avoidance and how HR is avoiding unnecessary costs. We need to talk about risk mitigation. And I like to define risk both downside protection and upside maximization. So maximizing our potential. And then the last lever, at least the way I have always talked about the function, is employee engagement. And so you look at these five sort of pillars of value, and if we are able to define our initiatives, working backwards from these five pillars, I believe it allows for us to show up in a much more differentiated way with our leadership teams, with our boards, and the like.
Yeah, it's funny because that's one of the reasons why I went to business school, right? I had studied public sector before. I got a
Mhm.
bachelor's and master's in international affairs, but I was working in the private sector. And so, I said, I need to understand if I'm gonna continue along this line, I need to understand the language of business. I need to be able to speak the language, right? Because
Sure.
communication is so important. So what does speaking the language of the CFO, what does that look like?
Mhm. No, great question. So I think, in at least the way I think about it, it's looking at these five pillars
Mhm.
and asking ourselves what people levers are influencing these five pillars. And in fact, I partner with the CFO to not just articulate this sort of vision I have of the function, but to work with him or her in articulating and what I would say quantifying the value amongst these five pillars. And so it's very important that when we talk about things like unit costs and understanding, getting inside the P&L, understanding how the P&L works and how the business makes money, and then working backwards and tying our initiatives, the work we do, be it a sales performance plan,
Mhm.
or be it the work that we do within our benefits plans to take cost out, that we work with our finance leaders to help quantify the value of these benefits, to vet them and validate them. And that gives us a higher level of confidence that the work we're doing is having the impact or the desired impact on the business.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, there's a book that was popular recently called The Five Love Languages. So, you're talking about the love language of the CFO, right? We need to speak the love language of the CFO.
Absolutely. I think it's something we should lean into. So oftentimes, we, metrics, they tend to have a financial slant to it. Nothing wrong with that. I say embrace it. Let's lean into it because guess
Absolutely.
what? The work that we do within HR, again, be it a rewards plan, be it something that we're doing within the benefit space, be it something that we're doing to avoid unnecessary costs on the business. These things have real impact on the business. And if we're able to tie that back and understand to the quarter, because as we're developing our initiatives and the work that we want to do within HR, it's important that we're able to tie it back to business value. That way, the work gets prioritized and the function begins to elevate and be recognized as a true thought partner, particularly in today's environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, using that same analogy of the five love languages, if you have a partner, if your love language is acts of service, but you have a partner that's constantly, you know, using another language, there's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect.
And I think it's the same thing in the boardroom. Um, you need to use the language that your colleague, that your partner, is appreciates,
Yes.
and in order to be effective.
No, I could.
And so, and I'm sure you've seen it too many times. HR leaders show up and are talking HR's language, and it
Yes.
doesn't resonate.
Yes.
Um, and so to have more impact, you have to sort of pivot in that way. Could you do me a favor? Because even though I've heard these five pillars before, I think it would be helpful to just reiterate what they are
Okay.
again.
Yeah. So again, the way I think about it is, there we can have an impact on the top line, so revenue generation. And so, um, what what are the initiatives that HR can involve itself in that will enable top line revenue growth? And so, um, it could be a sales commission plan that we've developed, and then we're able to correlate an increase in the top line to that sales incentive plan, as an example. So revenue generation. The second one that I look at is hard savings or hard dollar cost takeout. And so here, it could be a benefits plan redesign where you're taking out 20% of the costs, benefits costs via rebates. Um, so again, hard dollar cost savings. Our finance partners love that. By the way, it could be cost avoidance. So think compliance in this realm. And so the things we do to avoid OFCCP audits, fines, and the like, cost avoidance is one that I also like to pull. Uh, Finance acknowledges these, but I think they really love the hard dollar cost takeout more times than not.
Yeah.
The fourth one is what I classify as risk. And so it's, again, protecting ourselves, our downside risk, but also the things that we put in place to maximize the upside as well. So in this realm, it could be things like workforce planning or strategic workforce planning to capture a new market, for example, on the upside. And then the last one is employee engagement. And so the things that we do to enhance the employee experience that allows for employees to show up to their best and deliver to their best, exerting discretionary effort on behalf of the organization. If we're able to correlate those things, that value should also be recognized as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for repeating those. Those are just so powerful. From the first time I heard them until now, just is like, wow, that makes so much sense. Um, so you mentioned the importance of workforce planning in your framework. In this age of AI disruption and labor shifts, what is the most urgent pivot that HR leaders need to make um, in how they plan for talent?
Hmm. So this is a great question. I mean, look, here's the reality. Again, I alluded to earlier the work already underway. Companies like an IBM or a Moderna, and the way HR is being transformed. It's starting within the function itself. But then the fact of the matter is, when you think about this transition that AI is now bringing about, it's going to hit the task transactional sort of task first. So I always like to think the dull and mundane sort of work. If I were building a transformation sort of roadmap of how we transition to the future of work, it's that level or classification of work that has to go away first. Um, and AI via chatbots and the like can take that work on. And so when you think about new skills, um, work that defines the transactional and mundane work. You're seeing organizations today say, "Give me a reason why AI can't do this,"
Hmm.
or they would even approve a rec. And so this is happening right now as we speak.
Yeah.
Think about the HR function. It has been something that has defined the function, right? That HR is sort of transactional sort of work, and it's going to place an emphasis on the more strategic work, the things that AI can't replicate. And so things like strategic thinking and those kinds of skills, the ability to be flexible and adaptable, is going to be critically important. The ability to then shape and become architects of the organization are going to be critical. And so when you think about the job and workforce of the future, emphasizing that sort of the jobs that are likely to go away, World Economic Forum suggests that 92 million jobs are going to be displaced by the year 2030. 92 million jobs that go away, mostly driven by AI, to be replaced by another 170 million ish or so jobs. And so, what do those jobs look like? How can we get out ahead of that? And that's now become the work of HR. The transactional work goes away, and the more strategic elements of the work we do day to day are gonna be emphasized.
And that's a great point. As our work evolves and the transactional stuff is stripped away, then yes, we need to show up as more strategic, and that's the focus of the work. And I think that's the work that everyone really wants to do anyway, so it's a good thing.
Like,
But how do we as HR leaders stop playing catch up and start building predictive systems and get out in front of this rather than
mhm.
waiting for it to impact us, or having a decision sort of be made.
Yeah. No, exactly. You don't want the decision made for you, right? This is where we have
Right.
to become more proactive learners, right? Learning about the capabilities of AI, uh, being architects and becoming architects of the way in which we're now going to show up. And so if we know that our job, our function is evolving, so again, we're merging um, HR and technology and people and culture. And so HR, it's incumbent upon us that we become architects of this future of work. And so, absolutely, let's get out ahead of it. Let's understand AI's capability. Let's understand the human aspect of the work we do. Let's major on helping and assisting our organizations through this transformative sort of moment that we are now in. Because let's face it, it's happening. It's happening now, and
Yeah.
I think it's something that a lot of organizations are reluctant, perhaps, to talk about. But when you have economic pressure that are being brought on by tariffs or other events, um, then the cost takeout, dollar cost savings in order for the company to hit gross margin targets or unit cost targets. And we have to start to think about the function and the work we do uh, and ask ourselves some tough questions, right? How do we assist the organization in getting there? And that is going to be, again, become increasingly the job, I believe, of HR, particularly at this moment, because we're currently operating or exiting, sort of one phase of work and entering into this new era where we will be operating um, with chatbots. You're seeing an advent of the role of chief human resource and synthetic resource officer.
I
And so we're
love
going to,
that title. I've not heard that one before. That's a great one.
oh, absolutely. And so the role, the function is evolving, and it is incumbent that we get out ahead of it and become the architects of this
Hmm.
transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was Duolingo is the company that I heard that said they were going to be AI first. So before they would open a requisition to hire a person, a case needed to be made that it could not be um, handled by AI. And
Right.
so, yes, the CHRO is now managing the human workforce and the agentic workforce.
And the agentic
Um,
workforce. That's right. And we're
yeah,
here. I mean, it's happening. There are many other organizations, again, that are doing this today. Again, the announcement today from Moderna, where they're combining IT and HR. Just think about that for a moment and what that means,
it kind
right?
of scares me, to be honest with you,
Yeah,
because
it's fascinating.
we fought for so long, HR, the seat at the table, right? To
Right.
report directly to the CEO and not be layered. it concerns me, and I don't know anything. This is the first time I'm hearing about it, so I'll research it after. But it concerns me that again, the HR function could be subjugated, and maybe it maybe fall under IT, which will then report into the CEO. So now you're further away from the
Right.
fo focal point, which we need to actually be closer to more than ever now.
I couldn't agree with you more because again, there's a whole human aspect to this. And how do we manage this rate and pace of this transformation that we're now in today? There's a human element to this. I mean, we're dealing with people. And by the way, people and the need for the human isn't going away.
Right.
Right. In fact, if anything, there's going to be more of a need. The nature of the work, the task level, the transactional, the nature of the work
Work.
is what's going away. And by the way, we, like you said
Yeah.
earlier, we never wanted to do that anyway. So thankfully, that
And the
work,
governance.
exactly. So that work goes away,
Yeah.
and we now can flex our muscle, our strategic muscle, at a really critical juncture as the workforce transitions to this next era.
Right, right. And the model which you suggested about IBM merging IT and HR in my worst fear. I don't know how they're doing it, but in my worst fear, um, it neglects the fact that HR is still responsible for workforce planning, whether that's human or synthetic resources, like you said, how the work
Right.
gets done, the governance, the decision rights, all of that organizational development, organizational behavior, all of those things that now need to take into consideration, not just but the synthetic agents as well. So I
Yeah.
kind of see, and no disrespect to my technology colleagues out there, but I see the technology as the enabler, right?
Right.
But the HR or HR and S, human, H and
Right.
SR,
Right.
human and synthetic resources officer,
Right.
um,
Opposite.
being the driver of that change, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and and the culture, right? So and
Mhm.
the training. For me, it's the training. So you have to train these agents. Who's going to do that? And how do you
Right.
integrate these agents, these synthetic resources into the culture and give them a sense of the culture because they have to be acclimated to the culture as well. So there's a
This is
lot more to it than just the programming.
completely agree with you on that. By the way, it's Moderna, not IBM, who's now has they've merged these two functions. Uh,
Okay.
here's the good part about that one. At least it's merged under the HR leader, and so again, emphasizing still the human aspect of this. But you're 100% correct. It is as we go and embark on this journey of again human resources, synthetic resources. What does the organization of the future now look like? How do we transition from again where we are today and the emphasis now right on training, development, not just the human, but also the synthetic resource? How do we
Absolutely.
manage bias that are built into the large language models of these agents, so that we have a consistency in how we show up across the globe as an organization? These are the questions now, and this is incumbent. It's incumbent that HR leaders show up in this way, and again, bringing it back to the five sort of points of value. And in this one, right, what are the risks associated with going too fast? Right? What
Yeah.
are the risks in having an agent in this segment of the workforce versus a human? And what protections and security are we putting in place to protect that downside risk? Those are the questions, and why I think you're seeing this melding of the functions
Mhm.
today, because they're intricately intertwined at this point, as we embark on this transition.
Yeah. And for me, I think also the governance and the decision rights, right? So if there's a conflict between the human and the synthetic resource,
Who are you going to
who has
blame?
the ultimate, Well, or who has the, what is the protocol?
Exactly.
And who has the ultimate decision-making right, and how does that work? I think there's so much to this. It's fascinating, and it really gives the best HR leaders the opportunity to step up and lean in and really demonstrate some things that we might not have had as much opportunity to demonstrate in the past. I think it's a
Exciting.
beautiful point in time.
It's an exciting time, right? We no longer have to focus on the transaction or the things that would get in our way. And now we can focus on the things that the business is grappling with today, literally at this moment. And what an opportunity for us to inject a little bit of humaneness in how the workforce transitions, right? And brings in the agent and builds out this agent sort of or synthetic resource. Again, your point, governance, decision rights,
Mhm.
context, education are all critical at this point. And again, I just think it's an exciting opportunity for HR to take the lead.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So just let's see. Oh, there's a question. I agree. HR needs to stop playing catch up and start leading the transformation that's reshaping the workplace. Absolutely, Alan. For sure. What resources are you aware of that maybe um, our HR colleagues can make use of to stay on top of what's going on in the AI space and
Mhm.
even the best thinking in HR, because I think that's sort of shifting too. The wells that we typically go through, I think, are
Sure.
changing.
Sure. I mean, look, there's plenty out in the sphere, be it Gartner, um, Sherm has been out at the forefront on some of this in terms of its impact on the function. On LinkedIn, uh, AI for HR has written research on this as well in the transition. Mercer
Hmm.
uh, has written quite a bit about this topic as well, and so I tap into all of them for the best and the brightest to make sure that we're staying current, and then putting it more importantly in the proper context, having been on the front line, um,
Yeah.
knowing how this is likely or could play out within our organizations, and then putting it in the context of where the organization is today, the culture it is in today, is the work that will define the function, at least during this period.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how I'm leaning into this personally.
Yeah.
I am a perplexity fellow, so I'm really learning the tool from the masters. I'm pursuing a certification in AI.
Mhm.
I want to master the use of the tools and the use cases so that, you know, I'm aware of what the um, capabilities are.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, tech, I don't think that should be the sole responsibility of tech. We have to partner and really be able to
Mhm.
come to some agreement on that. And those courses are still being developed, right? Because
Right.
it's not new, but it's new, right? It's new.
It feels new. It still feels new to me. In fact, it's
Mhm.
moving so fast, Andrea, that quite candidly, what you thought you knew 30, 40. I mean, look at OpenAI, for example, and where we were 6 months ago, not even
Yeah,
3 months ago,
yeah,
and where we are today. And so, yeah, you're right. Organizations like an OpenAI, a Perplexity, Palantir through their boot camps. This is how I'm staying educated and staying current
yes,
with
yeah,
where the impacts are today, staying current on use cases, um,
yeah.
uh, staying current on what organizations are doing. So again, Moderna, in the case of Moderna, which recently announced that today, I think it was in the journal today, IBM
Hmm.
last week. And I think now you will have and begin to see a drumbeat of changes as organizations now move from pilot phase, right, to actually shaping their organizations with this technology.
Yeah. Wow. I really have to look into that. I mean, and it's so interesting, like, again, where you go for information. So there's
Mhm.
another tool that I'm obsessed with now by the name of Manus, which I think is great. Has a lot of really strong research capabilities. I wasn't
Right.
aware of Palantir's boot camps. Um, there's, let's see, OpenAI has a OpenAI Institute, I think it's called, where they do have
That's
some
right.
training, and that's
Yep.
free.
Yep.
Um, So several others, but again, it's not our usual wells because, like you said, it's moving so fast.
It's moving incredibly fast, and so again, staying out and current with who's at the leading edge of this. So when I think about leading edge, again, an OpenAI, a Perplexity, an Anthropic, a Palantir, again, from in terms of use cases and how AI is actually being deployed. So it's one thing to think about it, right?
Yes.
It's another thing to have actually done it. And so when I want to learn from the organizations that have actual use cases that they've developed, that they've learned from,
Yeah.
and then how does that then translate when you look to scale it enterprise wide? Because again, a lot of organizations are in that sort of pilot phase, but
Hmm.
very quickly they're moving from pilot to actually shaping their organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So, for me, I will tell you, if anyone wants to find the talent, the chief human and synthetic resources officer that can help your organization get to that phase, um, or chief AI officer, any of those leaders, that's my domain, right? I'm executive search, and specialize in finding talent and assessing talent and building pipelines for leadership succession plans and doing things like that. Um, how, if an organization would like someone with your expertise, are you open to assisting, or how can
yeah, that's the work
how
I'm literally doing now, and so it's working with again smaller to medium sized organizations that can move a little bit faster
Mhm.
than most. And so I am working currently with two organizations today, one in the healthcare space, and then one in I guess you'd call it insurance space. These are two sectors, by the way, that I think are ripe when you think about, again, the repetitious sort of nature of certain work, the task sort of transactional nature of some of the work. And so, pilot phase, sort of, how do you ready the organization? How do you build and craft initiatives? How are you going to measure the ROI? So again, bringing it back to value creation, very important that, you may have a thought on where you want to deploy this technology. And then at scale, what does that look like? And so working with your IT partner, working with your finance partner to build your business case for this,
Mhm.
critically important. And so working with smaller organizations that are able to move a little bit faster, some that are moving full steam ahead, and I have sort of cautioned against some of that, particularly when you start to think, how do we make these agents smart and putting this technology in the right context? Um, and so I've always just sort of said, look, let's start with a pilot, start small, but move fast because the technology is here and it's not going away.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and you're also, I don't know if those two organizations that you mentioned you're the board advisor, like on the advisory board, or are you engaged as a consultant? But I know you do some advisory board work as well.
But these are both in these two particular engagements, at least these are sort of, I guess you'd call them, these are consulting assignments, sort of fractional HR leadership roles to help them scale. And you think about, again, for the small to medium sized business, this is great because it allows for them to stand up an HR function with minimal costs or with not as much cost as they may have thought. And they're able to then take these resources, budget, and deploy it more on the front end of the business or more towards innovation. And for the small to medium-sized business that's looking to scale, and they are at a point where you need the HR support, you know you need it, but boy, you'd love to continue scaling. This is an opportunity again for HR as a leader. How do we craft an HR function to support a business that's in hyperscale mode, without overly sort of burdensome sort of HR sort of checks and balances, if you would? And so we're able to design, in this case, in the case of the insurance company, an HR function, leveraging third-party vendors as HR business partners, right? This is real. This is happening. They're able to process inquiries with a 94% success rate. And so instead of hiring an entire HR operational center and business partners, we're able to build this model, operating model of the HR function with minimal costs, or with, again, less cost than what the business thought. And those resources are then able to be deployed towards the front end, continuing
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
generation kind of roles. And so I think, again, we're able to articulate what you're doing with your operating model, and then how we're able to take costs and move it towards the front end of the business, revenue generating. Now HR moves from a cost center to a revenue enabling function, a completely different.
Yeah. Yes. Um, Brilliant. I think that's a brilliant use case, and I want to stay very close to you to learn more about that as that evolves.
I love it. I love it. Again, we're able to exercise that muscle again, guys, that we've all always wanted. And so now, again, stabilizing an organization, getting it ready for this kind of transformation, starting to shape the function and the operating model, understanding the costs that are being avoided as a result of this model that you're standing up, redeploying assets and resources to the front end. Being able to talk about that and talk about your initiatives in this way, tying it back to, again, the 5 points of value, allows for us to show up in a completely different way.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Great. Well, this is a good conversation. We only have the one comment, and I'm not sure if there's anyone that has question. Give a few minutes for you to drop it in the chat, and we'll answer. If not, the recording will be posted. So if you have a question, if you're watching the recording and you have a question, post the question under the recording. Um, it will alert us, and we can come back and answer then. This is currently streaming on multiple platforms, so I'll have to check all of the platforms, but that's okay. Not a problem. Is there anything else that you want to share before we close today?
No, I think, again, working backwards, HR does a lot. And we're at a transformative moment with this technology, and this pivot that organizations are now making. And it's a unique opportunity for HR to completely reimagine our functions, the work we do, tying it back to value becomes really important. Putting it in the context of these 5 points of value, I think we're more likely to get our initiatives approved and supported by our various leadership teams. Again, talking in the language of business today, imperative, and what a moment for us to get out of the mundane sort of work and start to have transparent conversations about the impact that this technology will have on our function, our businesses, and the future of work. Let's get out ahead of it and be proactive about architecting this transformation.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me
Thank you for
in
having me.
this on this forum. Yeah, I just thought what you were saying when we were speaking one on one was so valuable that I thought it should be a broader conversation for others to hear because this is exactly where we're going, and this is the exactly the moment we need to be having the conversation. So,
Yeah,
thank you again,
thank you for
and for
having me.
everyone watching live or watching in the future on the replay, thank you for joining us. And like I said, if you have any questions, post them under the recording. Have a great afternoon, everyone.